Welcome to the intersection of city politics and everyday life. I'm Brian Lehrer. Mayor Bloomberg couldn't make it happen. Neither could the many urban planners, economists, activists, and business leaders who've been promoting congestion pricing for decades. But maybe in 2018, its time has come. Maybe the subways are broken enough, the traffic below this point, 60th Street, slow enough, and the gubernatorial election season near enough to make it happen. But how complex will this simple idea, a toll to discourage vehicles from Manhattan's business district using the revenue for mass transit, how complicated will the plan have to be to satisfy the many stakeholders? Strap hangers, outer borough and suburban car commuters, truckers, taxi drivers, Uber, and so on. Governor Cuomo is promoting what seems to be an evolving proposal that he released a version of last week. Staunch opponent, Mayor de Blasio, does seem less staunch now, but he insists, among other things, that the revenue be put in a lockbox for the MTA. So will this indeed be the year where traffic begins to flow, along with funds for the buses and subways? To dig into the politics and finances and get the wider regional perspective, three guests. Sarah Kaufman, Assistant Director for Technology Programming at the NYU Rudin Center for Transportation. David R. Jones, President and CEO of the Community Service Society of New York, the longtime voice for low-income people. And Nicole Gelinas, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, a contributing editor to their City Journal, and a New York Post columnist who writes on economics and urban policy. Welcome, all of you. And let me just start here. Sarah, you first. What does Governor Cuomo's plan get right and wrong, in your opinion?
What I appreciate about Governor Cuomo's plan is that it's multi-phased. And first, we're going to address the lower-hanging fruit. We're going to fix transit first. We're going to address parking and moving violations that are not being enforced right now and causing major delays. For example, drivers blocking intersections with their cars that have cascading effects throughout the city. And we're also going to look into the use of curb space, which is a major sticking point right now as deliveries to residential and commercial buildings throughout the city increases with the rise of Amazon and other online shopping behaviors.
You said low-hanging fruit includes fixing mass transit first?
The most urgent needs. For example, vehicles blocking bus lanes. That is low-hanging fruit, and with some enforcement, we can help buses move a lot faster, which will incentivize passengers to ride the bus instead of getting in a car.
So those are some good things. Is there anything you would say you like least about the Cuomo plan?
No, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens in terms of the actual tolling that's coming later on, and whether that'll be done in a license plate reading fashion or with GPS, which isn't always effective in cities like Manhattan, in areas like Manhattan with the dense urban buildings.
David, you next. What do you like best then?
Well, you know, the notion of congestion pricing, and obviously you're talking about a significant revenue. $1.5 billion has been one of the estimates. I'm on the MTA board, and I've seen it firsthand. The system needs an enormous investment to really deal with the slowdowns that everyone is suffering, and the sort of crippling effect on New Yorkers generally, but particularly on working New Yorkers. There are 800,000 people below the poverty line using the subways and buses, and this is their lifeline to work. And the fact that the buses keep slowing down, the subways keep slowing down, people actually lose jobs because they can't get to work on time.
Are you a Cuomo appointee to the MTA board?
I'm a de Blasio, though he may want to disqualify me because I've been one of the staunch supporters of congestion pricing right from the beginning. And I think, however, the mayor hasn't shifted from the time we first were talking to him about this.
And there is a 2-year phase-in, as I understand it, of this Cuomo plan before they would really start charging the cars and other vehicles, so that some improvements to mass transit could be done. What do you think, as an MTA board member, you can do in 2 years?
Well, there's some things they're trying. You know, the signal enhancement, which would actually allow for more trains to be run in the system, will take a while. But some of the things they're doing, you know, the new focus on getting trash off the tracks, the various improvements to bus traffic, which can hurt, you know, they've come up with a new system to essentially allow the signals to recognize buses and give them priority. But I think all those things can start moving it forward. But this is not going to be a simple fix. I think you're going to have to show the public, first of all, that you are making the investment and have long-term plans to present them. But you're talking about years to get us back to a system that is really efficient.
And I know you advocate a reduced fare Metro card for low-income people. Does the Cuomo plan include that?
The mayor's plan does, and we are certainly talking to the Cuomo people about it. And we feel that this is the kind of thing that may be something that will come up as legislators are concerned, particularly in low-income neighborhoods in the outer boroughs. That this is, we think, will be an incentive for them to consider congestion pricing. That their people who are below the poverty line can actually get some incentive to use the subways. This is a long fight.
Nicole, what do you like and not like about the Cuomo plan?
Well, this is supposed to solve two separate problems. One, the traffic on the streets, and two, give the MTA money. And the details will matter on each of these problems. The first one, in order to deter people from riding in a car, the fee has to be high enough to achieve that. And with Uber and Lyft, these companies are in a war to the death for market share. They are already heavily subsidizing the rides. Uber, of course, loses billions of dollars a quarter because it wants customers. And so the danger is that a nominal fee, $3 to $5, Uber will just take that as a loss and won't increase the price to the customers. Their goal is increased car usage, getting more customers, beating their competitors. That's the opposite of the city's goal. So the fee has to be high enough that it annoys people, and it's not clear that this proposed fee is high enough to do that. Of course, there's only one way to find out, but the state should retain the flexibility to raise it if it is not meeting certain metrics.
What's the fee as it's proposed?
It's $5 for a for-hire vehicle, and a little bit higher for a car.
Right. In other words, if you're in a taxi or an Uber or something and you're coming into the zone, that is Manhattan below 60th Street, there would be a $5 surcharge added onto your fare.
Right, and is that high enough? Probably not, because A, you have people who have been used to decades paying 30, 40, even more to ride in a private black car. They're not going to care about $5. And then on the other hand, you have people who have gotten used to taking subsidized shared rides, and if this is just another part of the subsidy, they're not going to be deterred either. So the other issue of managing traffic on the streets is the city is still responsible for a lot of what the streets look like. And one of the biggest contributors besides Uber and Lyft to traffic is the construction sites. If you walk around Midtown, entire lanes are taken out of commission by construction firms to build buildings for months and years on end. And these are the pinch points where 53rd Street, for example, 2 whole lanes are gone from 53rd between 5th and 6th to build the MoMA Tower. That's been the case probably for 2 years or longer. And so it doesn't matter how much you break up the traffic coming up to this point, everyone is still pinched at this point. And that is a city issue of not pricing these lanes that are out of commission. They only charge a little bit more than $100 a month for an entire lane. The market price is thousands of dollars. And so finally, on the traffic issue, I don't think people's expectations should be too high. I mean, that may seem a little bit silly to say, oh, we want to fix traffic, but we really don't. But right now, traffic moves around 7 miles an hour, a little bit slower in Midtown. You don't want people going 25, 30, 40 miles an hour. It's never going to be more than 10, 15 miles an hour. And you don't want it, right, 60, right, you don't want it to be very fast because it's dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists. So if people have this idea, which I don't think they do, given the faith in government, that suddenly they're going to pay their fee and they're going to be speeding through Midtown. Right. That's not going to be the case. We're looking at marginal improvements to predictability and consistency.
In fact, it seems to me Sarah, that there have been almost 3 generations of congestion pricing proposals. And originally, it actually had to do with congestion, that there was too much traffic in Manhattan, and some policy wonks had an idea to fight it. Then it became about the environment. They wanted people to drive less so that we contribute less to global warming and ground level polluted air. Now it's about funding the subways. So it's the same proposal, but I feel like the reasons for the proposal have really changed over time.
We're actually at a point where it's all 3. We've reached a tipping point, and people are stuck on the subway. We have about 70,000 subway delays every month now, which is more than double what it was 5 years ago. And at the same time, as Nicole mentioned, traffic is crawling. Even in the the Midtown core, it's below 5 miles an hour. So people can even walk faster than they can drive in Midtown at this point. And at the same time, they're finding convenience and somewhat affordable rides in car sharing and taxis. So that's a much more enticing mode. So there is this confluence of events that gets people away from transit and struggling to find an answer. Most New Yorkers agree that we need some solution, and it's taken a while to get to that point. The experience in London after they instituted congestion pricing is that car traffic was reduced by 30%, and carbon dioxide emissions were reduced by 20%. So we've seen a lot of improvements abroad, and it would be ideal if we could move those same improvements here.
David, is the mayor being constructive by competing with the Cuomo proposal with his millionaire's tax to fund the subway?
You know, I don't want to particularly get into this fight. Obviously, there's friction between the mayor and the governor, and everyone knows about it. I actually think you're going to have some meeting of the minds to have any hope for getting any of these proposals through. First of all, I don't think even the $1.5 billion of congestion pricing is enough of a new money stream to really make this system the kind of efficient system we want.
What should the goal be in annual additional revenue generated?
It's hard to say, but we've suddenly got debt service on the loans that are being taken out by the MTA that are, last time I saw, we're approaching 20% of the monies that the system needs.
Wow. That's $2 billion a year.
Yeah, and that wasn't there.
So just to keep up with the debt on the money that the MTA has borrowed in the past.
And again, you know, they're always saying, "Oh, we can sell you more debt," but ultimately, it's going to make it really difficult to keep the costs of the system down. So I think we're approaching that limit. And therefore, there have to be other streams of money other than us going into the debt service, you know, debt arena again.
Nicole, I think this is in your expertise too. I mean, has the MTA been incredibly irresponsible over time to accrue that much debt?
Well, first, I wanted to say something about the millionaire's tax. I don't think it's wise for de Blasio to be pursuing this now. We have the federal tax law that limits wealthier people's deductibility of their state and local taxes to $10,000. And so while most people see a tax cut, there are some people, and these are the people who are responsible for a disproportionate share of our tax revenue, who will see a significant...
The wealthier people who pay more than $10,000 a year in state and local taxes.
40,000 families pay 40% of the city's income tax, and they do have a new incentive now to spend more than half of their time in a lower tax state and avoid some of these taxes. And so it's not prudent to raise taxes on these people before they've even thought through what this means for them, especially given that we're in an economic boom, and usually the city and state reserve tax hikes for when we're in a fiscal crisis and they need that source of revenue. Right now that's not the case, and we could move some revenue from other programs into transit, and we have a record tax revenues at the city level right now. And on your question, does the MTA spend this money well? The answer is no. They need money, but they need more than money. They are consistently over budget and over time, not only on mega projects like East Side Access to bring the Long Island Railroad underneath Grand Central, but even simple projects like rebuilding stairs on the AC&E line at 23rd Street, or rebuilding elevators, they are months behind. They're always hundreds of thousands or a couple $1 million over budget, and so they haven't shown that they can use this money well and put it toward modernizing signals. And under their plan, modernizing signals is going to take 40 years.
Well, a number of us on the board have been complaining about some of the priorities in terms of station improvement. Some of the amenities sound great. We love USB ports. You know, I have children who are overjoyed with this.
Meaning you can plug in and charge things in subway stations?
Yes, but there's also the notion and artwork and new lights on the bridges. Frankly, I think it's because of the crisis that occurred that many people didn't see coming. I've only been on the board since late 2016. But when you start to hear from my own staff and others, you know, the delays and how difficult the commutes have become, the notion of certain kinds of amenities, which were the focus of some of the station improvements, were clearly misplaced. They're not terrible, but
you're saying the money should have gone to signal repair, basically,
absolutely.
Right?
And I think there's a realization now, and actually the new head of transit, Andy Byford, who just came on from, you know, other systems, seems to be recognizing that. So they have to shift. Some of this was politically driven. This was what, obviously I've worked for politicians much too long, and there is a sense that we want to build, you know, sort of monuments to ourselves, whether it's having a bridge named after you or whatever. And I think they miss, it's not quite as, you know, sexy or romantic to have signals. It doesn't show up. You know, how can I talk about here's my signals? But in fact, this system has a lot of basic repair that if you're going to improve it, that has to be done.
On naming a bridge after yourself, you know, one of the problems when we talk about what kind of tolling this will be, it's not old-fashioned toll booths. It will be some kind of reader so that the traffic could continue to flow. But we know that on the brand new Mario Cuomo Bridge, previously known as the Tappan Zee, probably a lot of people will continue to say Tappan Zee like they continue to say 59th Street Bridge and Triborough Bridge. There have been problems with the readers, and people don't realize that they're being billed but not really billed, and now they're being overcharged with all kinds of penalties. So that has to be done right in order for people not to feel ripped off.
Absolutely. The technology has to be tried and true. And as David was saying, the most basic technology, the signals, have to be improved. About half of our delays on subways are because of signals that often date back 100 years. And so we need to get subway signals in place, and then we need to get charging systems in place and using the state-of-the-art that's in practice right now in other cities like London, Stockholm, and Singapore.
Speaking of other cities, stick around, because I want to get your reaction to what we're going to show everybody. This next segment, which is about parking underwater. It's this week's installment of a regular feature we call Other Cities Do It. Time for Other Cities Do It, where we search the world for urban innovations that might work in the Big Apple. Today, underwater parking. No kidding. In Copenhagen, a private city planning organization called Rudin develops experimental projects. In 2016, the group built an underwater parking garage in the harbor beneath a pier. The project includes a park on the surface, as you'll see. The director of this undertaking was Ole Bach, whom we reached earlier via Skype.
We have built 500 parking places underneath the pier. We have reconstructed the surface and made a new square upon it. We have removed 200-300 parking places on the surface in a street close to the pier. We have created a new square on the pier where people can enjoy life. There are cafes, there are a beautiful view because you are outside in the water where you can see the opera, you can see the theater, you can see the castle where the queen is living.
Of course, concerned citizens in Copenhagen were well aware that More parking would likely draw more cars into the city, increasing congestion and pollution. But it turns out local leaders made sure that the project would not increase the total number of parking spaces in the city.
It was important for the politicians to make sure that we did not get more traffic in the area. So they decided that if we built those 500 parking places, then they would remove 500 parking places on the surface in the neighborhood. So you haven't got more traffic in the area. Actually, you have got less traffic because now people know where to go and park. Earlier, they drove around in the street to try to find a parking place. You could say that we have moved 500 parking places from the surface and under the earth. And then you have given space to people to live on, not to park on.
Ole Bach admits the Copenhagen project costs a lot per parking spot, 1 million Danish crowns or about $150,000, but well worth it, Bach says, for what it gives the people. By the way, there are also underwater parking lots in Amsterdam and Geneva. So would it make sense to build parking under the Hudson River or the East River? Send us your thoughts on that via Twitter to Brian Lehrer TV. And that's Other Cities Do It for this week. So who wants to float this idea or submerge it for New York? Terry, so what do you think?
In New York, it would be very interesting to see how we would manage it. Right now, we're facing an L train shutdown of 18 months or so because of water flowing into the tunnel after Hurricane Sandy. And I'd be curious to see how a structure like this would hold up after the next major storm. That being said, Copenhagen and Amsterdam and Geneva are cities that have learned to live with water and manage the flow of water despite climate change. And we have a lot to learn from them, so I believe that we can look to them as a model for this and their other mechanisms.
Nicole, I gather from the video that it's not to increase the number of parking spots, just to say that again, just to move where some of the parking spots are off the street underwater. You like it?
It's interesting, but I don't think it should be our biggest priority. I mean, we have a lot of parking spaces underground, under private residential buildings. There are parking garages that sometimes 2 and 3 stories that can fit several hundred cars for a single garage. And so we have a lot of off-street, unobtrusive, market-priced parking. The problem is the parking spaces on the street are not priced very well. They're not enough of a deterrent to keep people from parking. And where they are priced, a lot of people just illegally ignore the pricing regime. Public city workers who have placards, sometimes legal placards, sometimes they make up their own placards, park in illegal spots, park on sidewalks, in crosswalks, anywhere, double parked anywhere you can think of it. And there's no enforcement of that. So it's hard to see how this would work unless we enforced both legal and illegal parking on the street.
Interesting. Now, I know one of the big issues with respect to congestion pricing is what happens to people from the outer boroughs? Are they being treated fairly, especially low-income people from the outer boroughs? Is this in effect or aggressive tax? And David, I see that your organization did a study, and we're going to put up some results which seem to indicate that, and walk us through this, only 4% of outer borough residents commute by vehicle into the city, into Manhattan?
Yeah, and I think people, when they think about it, shouldn't be really surprised. The difficulty of parking, the slowness, to do this on a regular basis is hard.
And viewers, in case this is displaying small on your screen, that little sliver at about 2 o'clock on that circle, that's the percentage that actually drives cars into Manhattan to go to work from the outer boroughs.
And then when you cut it toward to people who are low income, it drops to ridiculous numbers.
And there it is, even less than that, only about 2% of low-income people who work in Manhattan get there by car.
Yes. They're using overwhelmingly, 58%, 60% use the subways and buses to get in. So actually, if you were sort of doing a cost benefit analysis, if you really wanted to help people, it's help the subway and bus system.
And the final graphic on this, do we have that graphic? It's, we're going to see people, little stick figures representing the people, and it looks like 38 people are on one side of the line and just one person is on the left side of the line. What's this?
Yeah, well, it's basically showing in a graphic way just who would be benefited by something like congestion pricing as opposed to who would be harmed. And as we've discussed, if there was real concern about it comes to about 5,000 people who are low income that were really in trouble, you could do something to provide them some kind of reduced fare, just as we've suggested doing reduced fare for subway and bus riders.
A thing that Mayor de Blasio and others have brought up is people who need to come in to Manhattan for medical reasons. Somebody said to me, just, you know, didn't study it really, but said, oh yeah, God, Sloan Kettering, they're going to move to New Jersey if they do this. And the mayor didn't say that, but the mayor did say maybe there could be some kind of hospital or medical exemption to the, pardon?
Yeah, of course you could do.
You could.
Yeah, you get a note
yeah.
and you send it to the traffic bureau and you can do this. This is, because the technology has moved so fast, you know, open road tolling is totally flexible. You can decide hours when it's imposed, who's it imposed on, a whole range of options you've got now.
Can I get the two of you in our last minute or so to talk about Uber and Lyft and how much they're the problem in increasing congestion in the city? We just saw Crane's article before going on the air, which says the parking garages, those ridiculously expensive parking garages in Manhattan, are actually losing a lot of business in the last few years because so many more people are taking Uber and Lyft. But that means, especially with Uber, I guess, there are just so many cars on the street. Does something need to be done, Nicole?
Oh yeah, Bruce Schaller, who used to work for the DOT, he put out a report just a few months ago, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but the number of vehicle miles traveled in a for-hire car has just skyrocketed over the past 5 years. Taxi trips are down, but these black car trips have more than made up for that. And the cars are inefficient in that the way Uber works is they want you to press your button for your car and it comes right now. People aren't waiting 20 minutes like 10 years ago when you'd call a car service. You'd wait, you'd have to plan it. But in order for the car to be ready, there have to be multiple cars idling, nothing to do but wait for you to call or wait for you to press your app. And that's what they're doing. If you look around Midtown Manhattan, black cars that all say TLC on the license plates, they're either riding around very slowly waiting for a fare, or they're double parked at the curb. They're waiting for something to happen.
Sarah, last 20-second thought on this?
There is an opportunity for Uber, Lyft, Via, Chariot, these other companies to provide a solution, actually, to provide what's called micro-transit, basically a more agile bus system. So all these rides would be shared, and instead of having 6 separate Ubers on the road, you have 6 people in an Uber pool, and they can get around more easily, and it's a more efficient way of getting people around than the 6 separate cars, and it would reduce the number of vehicles on the road.
So it sort of defeats the purpose from the Uber convenient standpoint that people like to use it for, right?
It's halfway between an Uber and a bus in terms of convenience.
Thank you all very much. Obviously, we're not going to solve it all here today, but we appreciate a good conversation. And that's our program for today. We're here each week, midweek, at the maybe soon to be not gridlocked intersection of city politics and everyday life. And do tune into my radio program weekdays 10 a.m. to noon on WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, a call-in for students and teachers off for President's Week. Will you get involved in gun control activism when school is back in session, like they're doing in Florida now? I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.